and welcome to Celebrating Excellence. This is the Sir Arthur Lewis Community College in St. Lucia, the resting place of St. Lucia's Nobel laureates, Sir William Arthur Lewis and Sir Derek Alton Walcott. This program celebrates the importance and significance of both of our Nobel laureates' accomplishments and the annual Nobel Laureate Festival. The theme for 2024 is Celebrating Excellence, inspiring our collective imagination, fostering national pride.
Mr. Kurt Harris is the Dean of Academic Partnerships and Internationalization at the Sir Arthur Lewis Community College.
We asked him to reflect on the economics of education in small developing states, a challenge which Sir Arthur himself would have had to confront in his leadership roles both at the University of the West Indies and the Caribbean Development Bank.
When we think of the topic, the impact of education on economics, which is essentially what this question is asking, and how Sir Arthur Lewis at the University of the West Indies and at the Caribbean Development Bank would have dealt with that. Many persons tend to refer to the quote of Sir Arthur Lewis speaking about education is the way out of poverty in essence. But what does that mean? And how do we implement that particular quote? How do we resolve that problem? And a number of questions begin to arise when we start to think about it. One of the questions that we ask ourselves right from the off is that, is education an investment or is it a cost center? So you would have seen over the years here in St. Lucia, every single administration since the advent of independence has invested heavily in education and have all stated that education is a priority. We may differ whether or not they've actually done what they have spoken about, but they've all made it very clear that focus on education. However, have we seen the impact of such investments on our economic and social space? This is the question that we need to respond to see whether or not we are actually investing or it's just a cost center for us. But what is an education system and how do you get education to have that impact that Sir Arthur Lewis spoke about? And I think for small island developing states, there are three examples that really stand out that we can look at. One is the Japanese education revolution after the Second World War in 1948. The Japanese education revolution and the others that I'll speak about have three things in common. They were focused, they were deliberate, and they were planned. Our education system tends not to have those three components to it. They're just spent on. In Japan after 1948, after the bombings in Hiroshima and the World War, the Japanese decided to focus the education system on mathematics and science. And we saw what happened in Japan after that. And we saw the impact and the transformations that took place in Japan. They became leaders in technology. They became some of the greatest that you would have known back then in terms of math and science, because it was very deliberate that the education system would focus on that. We have the Singaporean model to look at as well. Singapore at one point in time was considered the most filthy country in the world. Litter all over the place. And then there was a deliberate, focused and planned education revolution. But the focus was on discipline, where everybody within the education system was taught and encouraged to be disciplined. Today you see the impacts in Singapore as a result of that discipline. And then in Cuba, which is a lot closer to us, you had the focus after the revolution of Fidel Castro of literacy. And then they focused their education system on three areas: medicine, sports, and agriculture. And we all know of all of what the Cubans have been able to achieve. So the question that we ask, what is it that we have focused on in St. Lucia? What you find happening in St. Lucia, at one time we all hot on tourism, then we all hot on agriculture. Today everybody's talking about coding, but what are we focusing on? You've noticed that the three examples that I've cited have clearly focused the education system on a specific area or areas, and they have maintained that because education must be continuous. Don't get me wrong, it's not that you don't also align with other areas, but there must be that focus in your education system to ensure that you have that continuous impact that can translate into the society. The last part of an education revolution, Sir Arthur Lewis spoke about, and to have education impact your economy as you would like it to have, is that education must be able to express itself. And what do I mean by the expression of education? When persons complete a course of study or courses of study, how do they express that knowledge? Where are the outlets for persons to now utilize that education to impact their economy? Too often we see persons who studied engineering working in supermarkets, working in marketing. Persons who studied marketing are working in tourism or something like that, where persons aren't getting that opportunity to express the knowledge that they have gained. So therefore what we have is that we have an undertrained society within these sectors, but maybe an overtrained society overall, because we have not created opportunities for the expression of knowledge. So for education to have the impact of reducing poverty and ensuring that you have economic development, it must be planned, it must be deliberate, it must be focused, but it must be able to have expression. And that is why I think in small island developing states, we have failed so badly, that already we are not focused on our education system, but we lack creating the opportunities for expression. So you ask yourself, how does anyone coming from getting trained, getting educated, get opportunities to express themselves? Our development banks seem to make it even more difficult for persons to get loans for startups and things of that sort, which you notice that venture capitalism is a huge thing in a lot of states that have driven innovation, driven employment, driven change in their economic status. We don't do such things here in the region. So education is continuous, it is permanent, and it must have the agreement of our leaders. And do our leaders really want an educated society? Because an educated society is a more difficult society to manipulate. And the question is, do leaders truly want a truly educated society? Because decision making then becomes a lot more difficult for leaders. So then in small island developing states, you find that they are quite happy without having that focus education approach, without having the expression of education, because then it limits persons' opportunities, encourages dependence, and therefore allows leaders to continue in the way in which they have. So for me, if we're looking at the education as it relates to the impact on our economies and economics in small island developing states, these are the things that we need to start to do from the off. We need to come together in our education system. And if you look at what happens in St. Lucia, there's a high focus on early childhood education. But as you go up in the levels of education, the investment, the focus, and the attention wanes. So it's difficult for persons to go on and study a bachelor's degree in St. Lucia. Persons get challenges for them to attend Sir Arthur Lewis Community College. So for example, you have 2,000 students in secondary schools in St. Lucia, and less than 1,000 apply to come to Sir Arthur Lewis. And a lot of the data that we have collected shows that persons don't believe that they can afford to come to Sir Arthur Lewis Community College. Yet, hardly anybody right now in St. Lucia has any issue about whether or not they're going to a secondary school, because the focus wanes and we focus on the lower areas, but then the expression of knowledge not only comes through employment, but also comes through persons acceding to higher levels of education along the chain. So we need to change. When our leaders speak, they speak a lot about subvention to education institutions. And when you speak about subvention, and if you break that word down, it is a sub-intervention. Sub means below, insufficient, not enough. So they are deliberately making a not enough intervention into education. That's what subvention means. They know that you're not getting enough. So then how does your education system grow? How does it improve? How does it revolutionize if from the off you are getting a subvention? So we need to move away from subventions to investments in education. We need to ensure that our education system and education approach is focused. Our education approach cannot be political. It cannot be that this party wants this, that party wants that. It must be a national agreement that this is where we are going to go for the next 20, 25 years and focus our education policy and delivery to attain such, because education must mature for it to see the impact on the economy. You're not going to be able to train somebody today and see the impact on your economy tomorrow. It's a long game. And I think that's part of the problem that we've had in small island states, is that much of our planning has been short-term. So for us, these are the things that need to happen, that the education revolution needs to take place from the top all the way throughout the system, where our private sector needs to understand and recognize its role in the education system, because the education system cannot be 100% funded by the public purse. The owners of capital within the society, in the private sector, must seek to invest, because the workers will come from the education system, which would improve their productivity and their profitability overall over time. So education, when they look at it as a cost center, is actually a major driver within our economic space. And it is imperative that if we are to grow our small islands, we need to have this focused, planned, continuous investment in education, as well as the opportunity for persons to express the knowledge gained from their education.
The Nobel Laureate Memorial Lectures will be recorded and available live stream on the National Television Network. Visit our Facebook page at Nobel Laureate Festival St. Lucia for titles and dates of the lectures and other festival events. You can email info@nobellaureatefestivalstlucia.com or WhatsApp 758-284-2111. I'm Delia Dolor. Goodbye.